Oh, the Sona ults whiffed. Oh, the Sona ults whiffed hard.
Alright, GG.
Alright, nice. We're Challenger on the Smurf. Ugh, good stuff. Good stuff. So, about a week ago, I got my second account to Challenger. I mainly have two accounts so that I can limit test and try for fun comps on stream, then off stream, or on my main account I can grind for snapshot placements. And so in this video, I thought I would go over 5 things that helped me to climb both my accounts to Challenger, specifically in set 7. With my playstyle and read on the meta, in my opinion, most of the time, combat augments are going to be better than econ ones. Sometimes you have bad starts and it's okay to take an econ augment and sack stage 2, however, because there's no yordles and or mercs, it's really hard to justify sacrificing HP for combat power. You always want to go for a combat augment if possible, and sometimes I even reroll my first augment if I really don't like my options. There are a couple of openers where econ augments are acceptable, however most of the time this isn't going to be the case, and I will get into that later in one of my other tips. However, for the most part, I try and always go for combat augments, and especially on your second and third augment, you never want to pick up econ augments as the second or third. In this set in particular, it matters a lot what 4 and 8 costs are already out of the pool, especially when you're playing a fast 8 board. Playing around what dragons are available to you as well as the other backline carries is especially important when you're playing flex. Let's say you're trying to play Corki and you scout around at 4-6 and 6 Corki are gone and 4 Idas are gone. You might want to start looking to pivot to a Xayah board, or at least considering the fact that you might have to play Siphon instead of Idas as your frontline. The same goes for when you're trying to play Xiaoyu. Consider flexing between Xiaoyu and Siphon and choosing the correct dragon based on what others are already playing. Of course you play what you hit, but most of the time it's important to know what's actually available so you can consider to pick up the supporting units so that you can pivot your board entirely. When reroll comps were meta, this was less important because more people were holding onto reroll units rather than going for all of the dragons. However, because most of the 1 cost comps have been gutted this patch, as well as the fact that most of the 2 cost units are support units, most people are going to be playing around 3 cost carries or 4/8 cost carries, which means everyone's going to be level 7 or 8 and taking your dragons. So it's really important to make sure that you're playing flexibly and considering all of your options. For example, in this game, I had best in slot Deja and I had enough gold to make the pivot. However, when I scouted around, most of the siphons were gone as well as 3 Deja. So instead, what I considered was on my roll down, most likely I'm going to hit Corki 2-star and Idas, and I can at least play that board and bleed out from there. Rather than trying to hard tunnel vision on Deja here, you'll notice when I roll down, I actually don't hit that many Deja, which isn't surprising at all. Instead, I hit my Idas 2-star and at least I can bleed out from this position. Like I mentioned earlier, I much prefer playing tempo and not taking econ augments. 5 loss streak in this set is pretty fake because there's no mercs and there's no yordles. The econ you gain is not worth the 30 to 4 HP that you would lose. However, there is one specific example where 5 lossing is actually really good. This is when you have Rich Get Richer and the Mirage synergy is Pirates. This means you can hit your 70 gold interval really quickly and then go fast 7 on 3-5, stabilize your board, and then you can usually go fast 8 on stage either 4-2 or 4-3, and you're going to be at your final board a lot quicker than the rest of the lobby. Yes, you'll lose some HP during stage 2, but you should be able to make up for it during stage 4 and 5. Remember, the main disadvantage of 5 lossing when you don't have this setup is that you're going to lose a lot of HP and you don't get the dragon odds. However, with this setup, what you're going to do is actually make back your HP as well as get really good dragon odds because you're going to be able to roll down at least 40 to 50 gold on level 7 around 3-5, which means that you're going to get very likely a dragon, if not a dragon 2-star and a lot of other upgrades. Remember that if you are playing this strategy, it's very important that you get your 5 loss, because if you win on 2-6, then you're going to go into Krogs with a lot less econ, and usually you're going to sack 3-1 anyway, so it's important to bench your itemized units if you think that it'll mean the difference between you losing or winning the last round. Similar to how I favor combat augments, I think tempo items are super important this set. My favourite 2 this set have so far have been Shiv and Sunfire. Although they might not be best in slot later, the amount of HP that they save in the early and mid game more than makes up for it, and in fact there are quite a lot of holders who can use these items late game quite well, even when you're playing in the AD route. Shiv is just that good that I'll slam it early if I have the board for it, and then tempo to a fast 8, and then just throw it on any other random unit, and even if I'm playing AD, it actually goes quite well on Corki and or Sonar. Other great slams this set are Frozen Heart. If you put it on a frontline unit and people aren't playing front to back comps during stage 2, then it rapidly decreases their DPS whilst making your frontline unit a little bit more tanky. Of course, I mentioned before that Sunfire Cape is also really good. I think Rageblade and GS are great slams just because they're best in slot in a lot of comps, whether you're playing AD or AP. And then Runen's Hurricane, if you want to play AD, is super strong early, as the amount of extra damage you get is flat, and so therefore it's strong at all stages once you start to get multiple items on that unit. It's not best in slot in Corki and or Xayah, however I think it's a solid item as the third item for these units. Of course, with all the new champions in the set, there's going to be new positioning rules, and I could dedicate an entire video to this. However, in this tip, I'm just going to be going over the main ones. So starting off with the early game boards, previously you might have positioned like this to avoid getting hooked by Blitzcrank, and although there is still a Thresh in this set, it's actually not a lethal hook, and what's more impactful is enemy assassins. So let's say that a Diana jumps in and you have this positioning, your Tristana, which is holding the items, is going to get one shot, or more than likely she's going to take a lot of damage and you can lose your main DPS. Instead, if you position like this, so you have a bait for the Diana, Diana will aggro onto whoever's standing next to Tristana, and in fact, if you don't even have a spare Taric or someone else that you can afford to backline, it's actually sometimes safer to corner your carries, because if there's no Blitzcrank grab in the lobby, then this is going to be much less lethal than if you let your carry get hooked by a Thresh hook. The reason is because if you box in your carry, a lot of the time the Thresh hook isn't actually lethal, and you'd much rather them not take aggro from Sins. In case you didn't know, Rage Wings don't generate mana from taking damage, so if you're playing around the synergy, it's important that any other unit who doesn't have the Rage Wing synergy is actually taking the aggro. If you position like this, for example, then the TK is going to be casting first, and if you were to position your Rage Wings at the front, they'd probably just take damage and die before they got their cast off. This is the same for when you're running Hecarim. You never want Hecarim to be your main tank and or taking aggro, so usually you just put them in the second or third row to ensure that this is happening. Senna will cast at the furthest unit, however it gets blocked by the frontline tanks. If you have a 2-star Senna in stage 2 and it has at least one item, it can easily one-shot 1-star backline units. It's for this reason that you want Senna to be the same side as the furthest unit. This means that you don't want it to be diagonally opposite, otherwise the casts are going to get eaten up by the frontline tanks. Sona on the other hand does want to be diagonally opposite because the cast goes straight through the front line, and this way it'll hit more units as well as stun the backline if they don't have a QSS. Xayah is pretty much the same. Because she has Swift Shot, you want to make sure that she's as far away from units as possible so she can increase her attack speed. And then when playing the Corki board, he doesn't benefit too much from being in the corner unless you think he's safer there and you have a QSS. Otherwise, if you want both of your carries to get the Lulu attack speed buff, you can position like this when playing Corki. When versing an enemy Siphon, it's more about how you position rather than how the enemy positions their Siphon. For example, in this positioning, if the Siphon aggroes onto the TK, he's more likely to ult towards the Sona and Lulu because they're within 2 hexes. Then Corki will be safe off to the side. This positioning is a little bit risky though, however, if they put the Siphon on the other side, then Siphon might just walk up and run directly to your Corki, which obviously isn't a good thing. Positioning around Siphon is very difficult. Maybe there'll be a patch in the future to change his AI, but for right now, it's pretty random given the typical boards you'll see. Talon almost always wants to be centered because he'll jump to the furthest unit, and this way he can assassinate those corner units. However, most of the time people don't corner their carries, so if you're just using him as utility, you can throw a Frozen Heart on him and then just put him on the side, which is correct, to jump onto the enemy carry. Ornn's ult sweeps across the board diagonally, so you never want to center him to get maximum value out of it. You don't have to put him in the corner, he can go second from the corner if you think that you don't have enough front line, and either left or right is good depending on where you want the charge to come from, as it does sweep across diagonally. Hecarim's kind of similar in the sense that he does diagonally sweep across the board, but he will ult towards where he's facing, so you have to use this to your advantage. Most of the time you can set it up so that you hit the backline units with the Hecarim ult as the range is quite large, and in fact if you have a blue buff you can put him in the back left corner and he'll ult before even auto attacking, which means that it'll diagonally sweep across the board, very similar to a Sona ult. When playing around Neeko, you always want her to take first aggro. This is so that she gets her cast off at the very start of the fight. So when playing the Jade board, it's very important that you never put Shioyu in the front row unless he's in the top left or top right corner. You usually just want to put Shioyu in the second row to guarantee that Neeko takes aggro from everyone on the enemy board. Nami only has 3 attack range, so normally in the early game you don't want her in the back row as this takes time for her to walk up. Late game you can back row her for some increased safety, however most of the time it's better to just put her in the third row so that she's not spending time walking up to attack units, as well as the fact that if she aggroes onto the wrong unit, she can run all the way up to the second row and then she's almost guaranteed to die. And that is the end of the video. I hope you guys did enjoy my 5 tips that I have to offer after climbing to Challenger twice this set so far. From now on, I'm going to be competing in tournaments as well as grinding to try and get rank 1. If you have any questions about the video, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and if it requires a discussion, then I'm more than happy to chat with you guys on Twitch, so make sure to go check out my Twitch down below. I have my first tournament coming up on the 9th of July, which is just only 3 days away, and that will be the first Open Cup qualifier for OS. So if you want to see what a tournament game looks like, then make sure you're tuning in on Twitch. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.